GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows. Available.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. We are transitioning away from wide receiver talk and how interesting that wide receiver market is going to be in fantasy college football to a running back who you may not have heard of, but I am very familiar with. Actually seen this young man live in high school playing for Don Bosco Prep, one of my high school's rivals, and seeing his growth as a running back in a Rutgers system that really values running the football. A Greg Schiano offense tailored to his assets. I think that this guy, you definitely don't want to sleep on this year. So without further ado, the college football player profile of Kyle Monangai. Now, the running back market in terms of college football is very much like the NFL fantasy football running back market, in that you feel there are a lot of top tier guys. Judkins is a no-brainer. Henderson might be even a no-brainer. Ollie Gordon II might be a no-brainer. Ashton Jonty out of Boise State, no-brainer. And then you have some guys in programs that don't believe get the respect they do, who really sneak up on you. And when you look at Rutgers, who I'm very familiar with, I see a lot of their games and I'm familiar with how they play. Not knowing the name Kyle Monangai will be very detrimental. Because the bottom line is, Rutgers uses a lot of different run schemes. They try and ground you down. That's their physicality in terms of their style. And knowing what I've seen live and transferring it to the Rutgers way, Kyle Monangai is someone that you have to keep your eye on. Now let's talk about Rutgers as a whole this season. I don't necessarily think that Rutgers are a team who are going to steadily improve. They're going to stay in this weird stasis where they're around 500 or so for quite some time. And it's not a knock against, their coaching style. It's just that the style of play is highly reminiscent of an older era. And it should surprise teams a little bit, the way they play. But it's not something that you're going to win with comfortably every single time, especially in this Big Ten. But when you are a team predicated on the run, you need a special kind of running back, and Kyle Monangai fits that profile. And now, with Gavin Wimsatt gone, who, if you do know Rutgers, is seen as one of their rushing quarterbacks, and a team that really values a quarterback who runs more often than he throws, that's something you often see in Rutgers games, outside of maybe the short-lived Noah Vedral era. You really need someone who is a workhorse in nature in early downs, but understands the situation wherever the football is on the field. You need a guy who can get you the 1-yard rushing touchdown, but you also kind of want the guy who can get you the 60-yard rushes that can really shock defenses with his speed. And Kyle Monangai, I saw it firsthand. He's a special player. This year could profile to be perhaps his best year, and it should really allow you to see the value he adds as a fantasy player as well. Last year's stats were astounding. 242 carries, 1,262 yards, 8 TDs, 5.2 yards averaged. His best performance was against Virginia Tech. That's a very good team considering where they are. 33.1 fantasy points, 16 carries, 143 yards, 3 TDs. His worst game is 8 carries, 16 yards, 0 points, 1.6. And so, the thing about Kyle Monangai that I really like is that when you look at the yardage totals, they're not eye-popping. But when you look at the performance, that was his best game. 16 carries, 143 yards. The 3 TDs are what stand out to me. Because I don't remember the game, but he could have gotten those TDs in 3 different ways. That's not something you can say very often about college football running backs. If you go through a list of running backs who really have that explosiveness after contact, let's say, or have that explosiveness in terms of open field play. You think about guys like Judkins, you think about guys like Gordon, but very rarely do you find a player who is highly valued for his rushing ability and also combines all the aspects of all the college football running backs you love in such a way that helps this team, who's using such an archaic style of play, actually be relevant. That's the thing. If you're a Rutgers fan and you watch Rutgers consistently, you understand how much of a value Kyle Monangai is in real life at the very least. If you're just playing fantasy football and you're leafing through running backs and trying to decipher whether or not you want an explosive guy or a guy who's a workhorse, you might gloss over Kyle Monangai because you might be unfamiliar with Rutgers. You might just think that Rutgers are a team that's not taken seriously because of X and Y factors that you don't know. But I challenge you this. Watch a Rutgers game and see what Kyle Monangai does in it. See the little spaces where he understands the nuances of situational football and see how you view him then, because he's going to be special. And now looking at the Rutgers roster. When I look at the Rutgers roster, I don't necessarily think that, Schiano doesn't see his receivers as valuable. It's just that his receivers really pick and choose their spots, if you know what I mean. When I think about a Rutgers receiver who probably profiled as someone you would want on a top Power 5 team, maybe Bo Melton would have been that guy had he been playing at a Power 5 team that valued his assets. But at the end of the day, that's not what Rutgers is. And I look at this new team. Afan Kaliakmanis of Minnesota comes in. And at the very best, he's probably serviceable. That's what I'll call him. You don't have many good receivers right now. Maybe Christian Jamel will step up. Only had about 460 yards last year. The brother of Kaliakmanis, Dino Kaliakmanis, maybe that brotherly connection comes into play. But at the end of the day, when I think about all Greg Schiano has done, he's found so many different ways to say, hey, we need you in the run game. He did it with Jonathan Lewis, a former St. Peter's Pro quarterback. Shout out to him. He did it with Johnny Langan, another Jersey stalwart who also was predicated on running the football when he was at Bergen Catholic in high school. So he finds different ways to utilize the run game with so many different players. And I bet you this season, even with Kaliakmanis, who profiles as more of a passer, who definitely is more of a pocket passer at that, not necessarily someone I would view as a dual threat player. This will really open up the window for Kyle Monangai to show that he's not just, a workhorse guy who Greg Schiano knows is his wild card. He's going to be the wild card for Rutgers. And he's going to be the reason why a lot of people might watch more Rutgers games than not, because he adds so much excitement to the running back position for Rutgers that they need. Because if they didn't have a solid running back, they wouldn't have a offense supplemented by someone who can actually play Greg Schiano's system. And the reason why a lot of people can't gloss over that is because in college football terms, it's always easy to go for explosiveness in the run game. You're always looking to hit the home run every single time. But the home run for Rutgers is getting a 6-yard gain, 5 to 6 yard gain. then seeing if wearing down the defense can get you a 6-yard gain. It's a chess game for them, and Kyle Monangai is the best chess piece on the board for them. You can't necessarily gloss over a running back just because he's viewed more tactically than most. If I were a fantasy football manager and it came down to, say, Ollie Gordon or Kyle Monangai, I would pick Kyle Monangai because there will be games where he's disappointing. Because there will be games where Rutgers' system will not work because they're against far superior teams. But when he does have the opportunities, and he does understand the nuances of the game, he's a very special, important player that you can't gloss over just because he's on Rutgers. And when I think about this year, especially for them, I think he's going to be a bigger weapon than most. There's no competition in the Rutgers running room outside of him. And so he needs to use that to his advantage, and if he does, the sky's definitely the limit for him. That will just about do it for this segment. Coming next, we have our only win projection predictions of the day for USC. We're going out west for them after the break.